The new reMarkable Paper Pro MoveThe and the Supernote Nomad are the two best small e-ink note takers when it comes to getting into flow state. However, they're both very unique devices. In this video, I'll walk you through all of the differences. So on this side of the ring, we have the new reMarkable Paper Pro MoveThe, and then over here we have the Supernote Nomad A5 X2. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call this the MoveThe and I'm going to call this the Nomad. Now, the first key difference is the screen tech inside of these. This is a Gallery 3 panel, so it has color, but it's also a very different technology and does have some compromises with the flashing, but it does have true yellow highlights, and you can see PDFs, books in color as well. Whereas the Nomad is a Carta 1000 screen, so it offers much better contrast in general, but is limited to just black, white, and gray tones. Also, I should note for this comparison, I'm going to have the MoveThe set to 100% brightness on the front light. And that is another key difference. This does have a front light, whereas the Nomad does not. The Nomad is a more standard paper-sized aspect ratio, whereas the MoveThe now goes to a 16:9. We'll talk about workflow a little bit later, but that lends better to more list style things. And then when you turn it on its side for notes, it does give you more width. And that width will be something more like the reMarkable 2. Here you can see in landscape, the screen is actually a tad bit wider than the reMarkable 2, for example. And that scaling looks like it's almost 1:1. So you would just need to be doing a lot more scrolling on here. But if you put it sideways, you can get it to be a reasonably sized text. Two more things about the screens. They both have ghosting. The Nomad, you are able to swipe on the side here to clear the ghosting. We'll talk about the gestures on both of these a little bit later, but that's how you clear ghosting here. On the MoveThe, it happens automatically, so it does it a little bit slowly, but you can see some of the ghosting wash away and kind of clear out. And so this is a little bit smarter in terms of ghosting. The PPI did improve on the MoveThe from the regular standard Paper Pro, the 11.8-inch one. And I don't hear that talked about a lot, but I do think it's rather important in a device this size because you do end up writing a little bit smaller. And also if you're reading PDFs or books, the text is a little bit clearer because it is smaller. That is quite important. The Nomad, however, does have 300 PPI, so it is generally crisper and sharper. But from the 260 range to 300, you're not going to notice a massive difference. Now, in terms of file formats for these two, the Supernote Nomad generally has a lot more support for formats. I'll list them on the screen here, but you can see the key differences between the two. And that leads a little bit into the next topic, which is Android apps. The Nomad has the ability to sideload Android apps. They're not natively supported, but you can. I did a whole video on that, so I'll put it up here if you're interested in checking that out. But the MoveThe does not have Android accessibility, so it is what it is. For e-reading, I think these are both a bit of a double-edged sword because this has good support and the native Kindle app, but has no front light. And then it's not as pocketable as this. This does have a front light, but then has no ability to have Android or Kindle apps. So it is limited because the EPUBs that you read on here have to be DRM free. So I actually don't really find myself reading too much on either of these. It's more kind of an edge case on both of them. I certainly still prefer something that's more dedicated for e-reading and is also waterproof, so you can take to the pool or the beach, and it just has less restrictions. I do understand that the reMarkable platform is very focused on being distraction free, and so having no apps does make sense. I think they should highly consider creating either their own bookstore or having some Kindle access in it, because that is a bit of a missed mark in my book. It does have a lot of great e-reader potential here. Don't have to scroll pages as often because it's a 16:9 ratio and it's pocketable. So hopefully reMarkable will consider something like that in the future. So getting into the dimensions, I'll list them up here and we'll start weighing the Nomad now. You can see it's tared here and we'll put just the Nomad here. This is the crystal version, so 267. And then we will get the Folio on here, pop that on. So 400, 401, oh, it's creeping forward too. And then the pens I have listed in order to weight, so we'll go one by one. You can see 416 for the standard push-up pen. And then the Lamy Twin Safari EMR, 419. And the new Lamy, 423. And the heaviest, which is the Heart of Metal, all in, you would be looking at 434 grams. You can see for the reMarkable Paper Pro's weigh-in, the device comes in significantly lighter, 227. Now we'll throw on the Folio. So we're looking at 325 total. And then this is the marker. You shouldn't really get much variation from the base marker to the marker plus. So you're looking at 343. So you can see the lightest configuration with a folio is still significantly heavier than the reMarkable Paper Pro Move. Looking at them side by side, clearly the Move isn't as wide because of the aspect ratio, and it is just a tad bit taller than the Nomad there. And you'll see thickness-wise, they look almost identical in the hand here. In terms of straight lines and shape support, the Move is very good for that. reMarkable added an update earlier this year that I covered that has the ability to add shapes fully. The Nomad, you can do straight line snapping, but there are some caveats to that. There are no shapes, and you can't do straight line snapping in Atelier, which is the drawing app. So you can do that in the general notes section of this. I'm hoping they add shape support soon and cross that over to the drawing app as well. So the Move is pretty fun to draw on. I'll let you hear it really quickly, but it feels more like pencil on paper. You can see that's blue, so it'll flash and then it'll turn blue. And then you also do have the ability to do shapes. And this is all just in the Notes app, by the way. So you do have the ability to do layers, whereas you can see I can hide this layer and it's just showing my color layer. And then on this layer, I'm just showing the outline I did. So you can have a reference layer too, but that has to be done as a PDF. So you can import a PDF and then you could make new layers and trace over it if you wanted to. I do find this quite fun to draw on because of the colors, and it's a nice little portable size for a sketch pad. Now, moving on to the Nomad, the drawing app is called Atelier, and they've had some updates recently. You can see I have a couple layers here. You can now have a reference layer, just like you could add a PDF on the Move, but now they added something called opacity channels. The Paper Pro Move does not have that. But you can see here if I move to, let's go to like 80%, you can see that turned darker right there. And that line that I have there turned darker too. Give it a quick refresh. But having opacity channels is really nice when you do layers. If you want to make one layer lighter, you do not have the ability to do line snapping in here, you can see. And neither do you have the ability to do shape snapping. You can do that in the Notes app here if you want to draw on that. And there are also more dedicated tools in here for sketching. So if you want to do some shading, you can do the spray tool here. And then the one thing I really like about the eraser here is, like, let's say I go soft and thick, I can do light cleanup, almost like a kneadable eraser. Whereas the eraser here is just either on or off. You can see there, it's just 100% or nothing. So here you have all of these tools and you have 3 levels between each one. Whereas here you have the pencils, different actual types of pencils, and then different types of markers, and you can do grayscale on each of those. This actually might have a wider variety of specific tools, but and I guess combinations, because you can do colors and sizes between all those. So this I find to be more precise because of these small ceramic tips that they have, but you can be pretty precise on this and it is quite fun. So I think I like this more for technical stuff, and then I like this more just when I'm lounging around and want to sketch, or I'm traveling and want to have a fun time sketching. And now we get into the styli. The Move has a specific proprietary active stylus. It has a battery in it and it charges when you put it on the side. Now you will need to replace the tips on these. Probably, I think my average has been about a month to a month and a half of either heavy use or normal use, and that should roughly last you about a year of tips. So just FYI. There's the Marker Plus that has the eraser on top, and so you can flip that around and erase quickly. But the standard stylus is about half the price, I think, and that does not have an eraser. I don't really understand why reMarkable doesn't give you the option to buy the reMarkable Paper Pro Move without a stylus, because I think a lot of people that have a reMarkable Paper Pro, the large version, might consider purchasing this for $50 less if they didn't need a marker and could just reuse their one from that. Hopefully they add an option to do that. Then these are all these Supernote markers. There's the Lamy pen, the Lamy Twin, which has a ballpoint pen, and you twist it the other way, it has a ceramic nib. And so all these are ceramic nibs, the standard push-up and the Heart of Metal pen. They do feel more premium in general, and they are a little more comfortable because they're thicker. And this one I added a grip, for example. You do have the ability on the Supernote platform to build your own pen. So you can do DIY pens with like pilot some of your favorite pens like Muji pens. Like I mentioned, these are also ceramic tipped, so you never need to replace the tips on these. Now for the folios of these two, They are relatively similar in some senses. They both magnetically snap in. I've never had them fall out, so the magnets are pretty strong. The Move has a little flap here in the back, indentation, where you can seal the pen in. The magnet is very strong for the pen, so it's not always necessary. But if you just want that little bit of extra peace of mind, if you're throwing it in and out of a bag, that is nice. And it just goes back there too. These folios can get pretty expensive, so this is one of the more basic ones, but if you get the leather ones, the top tier ones, those really get up there. I know a lot of aftermarket ones like the IO2 that they had for the Paper Pro, the big version. So I'll link those below. Bit of a cheaper way to get into the Move. The stylus, however, you pretty much need to purchase from reMarkable because it's an active stylus and it's a proprietary one for their platform. The Nomad folio is more traditional style. It is magnetic like that. You'll see it has a pretty strong magnet. It's more traditional in the sense that it doesn't have a strong magnet for the lock here, but you'll see it will open automatically. And then the pen loop is more traditional, just like a regular pen that you kind of slot in there. Whereas the Move is magnetic. You can see, but I've had this for 2 years and it's got a bit of a patina on it because I did get the white version. If I were to get another case, I probably would get something a little bit darker than this. You also provide the magnets and the standards for these cases, so you can make your own too if you want. Just like the pens. Most Wacom EMRs should work on this, but the ceramic tips are tuned towards the Feel Right screen applicator they have on here. And then in terms of the USB-C charging, the Move has it on the bottom and the Nomad has it on top. The spec for charging for the Move is a little bit better. I believe it gets to 90% in about 45 minutes, whereas this tops up slower. But in terms of general battery life, I do find that the Nomad lasts me longer. I still haven't had enough time to fully test it, but I have a suspicion that a lot of that is because of the front light that you need on it. The front light is needed because Gallery 3 is typically darker than the Carta screen, which has better contrast. Speaking of the battery, the Nomad has the ability to be opened and you can change anything yourself. So the battery would be replaceable. I've had this for almost 2 years now. So maybe, in a year or two, I might want to swap the battery out. Although e-ink devices do generally have very good longevity for batteries because you don't charge them as much. But the Move, they actually changed a bit from the back design of the big Paper Pro. And you can see it's a little more textured now, which can be pretty nice for grip in general. It's got really good grip, but also because it's not a unibody design, I believe it's now easier to access, although you will typically not be accessing that yourself because it's adhesives. So it might be easier for a repair shop to fix it if it's needed, but good to see them making some strides towards easier repairability in general. Now for the workflow differences, I already compared the big brother, the Manta of the Nomad, to the big brother of this, which is the Paper Pro. So I'll just walk you through that really quickly so you can get a little bit of understanding of how the workflow is different on both of these devices. In terms of the organizational workflow, there's quite a difference. The Supernote platform has a lot more organization. So there's headings where you can create table of contents. It has keywords. It has star functionality where you can quickly do a star and it will recognize it and then it'll save those and you can search. The OCR also happens in the background, so it converts everything in the background so everything's searchable. You can link things like this website here, for example. If I click here, it'll go to the website if I was on internet. So on the reMarkable, the organizational workflow is very simple. It's basically just like digital paper. For handwriting conversion, I've still been testing this out. I do generally find it to be better on the Supernote, but I will put out a video on that soon. And so there's a big difference in those. And then really quickly, just in terms of the actual functionality of the paper, you cannot scroll up or down. You cannot pinch or zoom. Whereas this, you have the ability to infinitely scroll down. You can basically zoom in or out up to, I think, 5 times and then down to 0.5. So it creates this kind of infinite canvas style. So there's a big difference between the two in that sense. Sometimes PDFs can be a little trickier on the Paper Pro. Once we get into the actual PDF here, if I rotate this one, then it does have a good legibility. I can do that with the Nomad as well. And things look relatively about the same scale when you flip them sideways like this. But you'll see there is more stuff showing down here. And the Nomad actually splits it well. So it splits it in 2. So when I go to the next page, it's showing that full half of a page. Whereas here, you would actually need to scroll to read it all. If you're just scrolling through, you might actually miss some stuff because it doesn't scale perfectly well to a 16:9 screen. They do need to do some work on the PDF scaling and the splitting, but on the plus side for the Move, you do get color, and good for both of them is that you can use links. So we're looking at a car. Let's go to the trunk lid, and then we'll go to a different one here, Windows, for example. And you can see I can access those table of contents directly here. And then the Supernote does have the digest feature where you can pull stuff out of PDFs in a logical manner. You can annotate on both of them, and the reMarkable Move has the ability to snap to text like that, as does the Nomad here. I'm on the highlighter tool, but it will be gray. And then the Move has the ability to have a Chrome extension, which is really nice to send in PDFs here. And that Chrome extension is nice when you want to read stuff on here. The Nomad does not have a Chrome extension. You will have to either copy stuff on, put it on an SD card if you want to get it in, or you can just plug it directly in here to your computer and transfer stuff as well. In terms of general cloud integrations, these both do have a lot of Dropbox and OneDrive integration. So I'll list that on the screen here for you to see. With the Nomad probably being a little bit better because you can sideload Android apps. So there might be some integrations that you might be able to do on here, although that is more specific towards that app if it works really well on here. Generally, in terms of the apps, I'm talking about the mobile app or the desktop app. The reMarkable Paper Pro, you do have to pay a Connect subscription fee, which is $2.99 a month. I'm not a huge fan of subscription fees, but in this case, I will say that it is the best app in the e-ink world in terms of syncing. So you do kind of get what you pay for, and the syncing between my RM2, Paper Pro, or the Move is immediate on document close, and it's just a good experience there. They did just add handwriting search as well, which I've been testing, but I'll probably put out a video on that in a few weeks. The Supernote Nomad does have a desktop and a mobile app. Sometimes there are conflicts when you save something on one device and the other hasn't fully synced. So I'd like to see that repaired. I actually saw on Reddit the other day that they are working on that, and that's of utmost priority. Someone was complaining about it, and one of the Supernote administrators kind of responded there. So for general Android apps, this obviously wins. And then for the dedicated apps of these devices, in terms of getting notes from your phone, your laptop onto these, the reMarkable is better. But the Supernote is generally pretty good, and you don't have to pay a subscription for it. Really quickly for gestures on these two, the Nomad, like I mentioned, if you go up, it'll refresh the page to clear ghosting. This will do that automatically. So I'll just write test here. You can see if I do a double finger tap, it will undo each stroke. And then if I do a 3-finger, it'll redo each stroke. So undo, redo. And then you can single swipe, you'll go to the home page, and double swipe, you can see your recent files or your favorites up here. And then similarly here, if you swipe down, you can see your recent files here, and you can see your quick access tools and then some other navigation stuff here. You can undo by swiping up, and you can redo by swiping back down. And on both these devices, you can easily rearrange where the toolbar is by just holding and dragging. The Nomad does not have a standard home screen, but you can make versions of one for yourself. I will probably make a video on that soon. If you want to see the Nomad versus another good competitor that has a front light as well, the VWoods AI Paper Mini, you can see that here. Or if you want to see a full review of the Nomad, you can check that out here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.